Hi everyone. Tonight, we're slipping into something smoky and historical. You're barefoot, your city's on fire, and democracy's having a bit of a crisis. You can smell the olive oil boiling in the marketplace. You can hear the distant clang of bronze on bronze, and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Post your city and local time in the comments, just to remind yourself you're not trapped in 480 BCE. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's enjoy our ride tonight. You're running, not metaphorically, literally. Sandals slapping against dirt, cloak flapping behind you like a terrified flag, heart punching your ribs from the inside. There's smoke in your throat, and you're already regretting that second helping of lentils. Athens is burning, and the Persians are to blame. You never thought it would come to this. I mean, sure, 10 years ago they tried at Marathon, but you were young then. That was someone else's war. This one's personal. It started with Xerxes, the Persian king with way too much eyeliner and an army big enough to create its own weather pattern. He crossed the Hellespont with bridges made of boats. Boats, just lashed together like some kind of divine Lego nightmare. You heard stories, how his soldiers drank rivers dry, how his war elephants looked confused but committed. And now they're here. You pass the Acropolis on your way out, the sacred hill crowned by temples. You glanced back once, just once, to see the statue of Athena standing against the flames, her spear pointing accusingly at the sky, like she knows this isn't the first time you failed her. The streets behind you are packed with neighbors. You spot Callias the fishmonger dragging a cart of pickled eels. Someone else is carrying a goat that does not want to be carried. There's a baby crying. There's a priest shouting that the gods have abandoned you. There's you, clutching a bundle of scrolls. You forgot to return to the Agora library. You whisper, sorry, to no one. The retreat wasn't sudden. There were warnings. Themistocles, that sharp-chinned politician who's always smirking like he knows how the play ends, told everyone to flee, not run like cowards, relocate with strategy. His idea? Abandon the city, fight at sea, let the Persians burn stone while you crush their fleet in the narrow straits of Salamis. You weren't convinced, but now that the Parthenon's melting and a guy just ran past wearing only one sandal and screaming, "They're riding camels," you're warming up to the idea. You reach the hills outside Athens and collapse in a grove of olive trees. It's strangely quiet up here. You can still see the smoke. Thick, dark, oily. But it hasn't reached this far. Yet, you're not alone. A few hundred others made it out too. Some stare blankly at the horizon. Others pray. One guy starts building a model of the city out of rocks, whispering, "We'll come back, we'll come back." Like it's a spell, you lie back on the dirt and look at the stars. For the first time, you realize Athens might die tonight, but not everyone fled. Down at Salamis, Themistocles is executing his plan. He's lured the massive Persian fleet into narrow waters where numbers count for less and maneuverability wins the day. Greek triremes, sleek, deadly, rowed by men who probably haven't blinked in hours, smash through the cluttered Persian lines. Bronze rams split hulls, oars crack, men scream. From the hill, you can almost hear the roar of battle carried on the sea breeze. It smells like salt and sweat and something ancient cracking open. It's a turning point. Historians still debate how much of Salamis was strategy and how much was sheer stubborn Greek luck. Did Themistocles trick Xerxes into the straits? Did the Persians panic? Did Athena herself blow a well-timed breeze? Who knows? All you know is the tide turns. The Persians pull back. They burn what they can, but they leave. And in the smoldering skeleton of Athens, you and your neighbors creep back. The city is charred, blackened columns, shattered altars, ash that smells like history itself. But the people, they're already clearing rubble, hauling stone, planning. You meet a man who says, "We'll build it better." Then he coughs for 5 minutes because the air is still full of soot. But the point stands, because this is Athens, and Athens doesn't die easy. Within a generation, it'll rise again, stronger, with new temples, new theaters, new thinkers who will take these scars and turn them into questions, plays, architecture, and revolutions. You'll walk those new streets. You'll hear a voice on the wind saying, "What is justice?" You'll argue with philosophers, get drunk on wine that tastes like resin, and cry during a tragedy that ends with someone poking out their own eyes. But that's later. For now, you lie in the ashes and dream of marble. Spartan boot camp, you wake up face first in the dirt. Someone's kicking you gently with a sandal that smells like dried goat leather and regret. The sun's not even up yet, and already someone's shouting something about discipline and virtue and stop drooling on the ground. Welcome to Sparta. You are hoping for a nap. Instead, you're in the middle of the Agorge, Sparta's infamous state-run training program that turns soft boys into bronze-tipped nightmares. You want to cry, but that's lesson 1. No crying. The first thing you notice is how everything smells like sweat, iron, and old onions. The second thing you notice, there are no luxuries here. No soft cloaks, no pillows, not even spoons. You're given a thin tunic, a slab of barley bread, and a stare from an older boy that communicates, "Try me, city boy." There are no decorations, no murals of gods, just bare walls, chipped weapons, and a general vibe of earn your right to exist. You're 7 years old, by the way, and you've already been inspected for physical defects. That's not a joke. The Spartans believe in survival of the fittest, and they mean it literally. If a baby is deemed weak, it's not allowed to continue. Let's just say the mountain has seen things. You passed. Somehow. Maybe it's your symmetrical ankles, or your ability to bite back a scream when you stub your toe. The agage isn't school. It's not daycare. It's not a place to find yourself. It's boot camp every day for the next 10 years. You learn how to run silently, how to sleep with one eye open, how to fight in the dark with a dull knife and no shoes. Your classmates, boys from other Spartan families, are both teammates and rivals. One day, you're helping them build a shelter out of reeds. The next, you're wrestling them in the mud for the last turnip. No one says, please. No one says, great job. The best praise you ever get is, you didn't disgrace your ancestors. You whisper, thank you, and feel strangely proud. You train every day, rain or shine, blister or bruised rib. You run drills in the phalanx formation, shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield. You're taught to protect the man next to you, not yourself. Selfishness in battle is death. A commander barks. Your shield is not just for you, it's for the man beside you. Lose your spear. Fine. Lose your helmet. Fine. Lose your shield. Don't come home. You think he's kidding. He's not. Discipline is everything. You're allowed to steal food. Yes. Encouraged even. But if you get caught, you're punished. Not for the theft, for the incompetence. So now, your lunch is both a meal and a moral test. You sneak a hunk of cheese from the communal stash and bury it behind a tree root. You feel like a god for 5 minutes until a fox runs off with it. That's your dinner. You chew bark that night and pretend it's lamb. You learn how to take pain, literally. There's a ceremony called diamastigosis, a rite of passage involving being flogged in public, often in front of cheering crowds. Some boys die from it. You're told, endure, or die trying. You wonder why anyone chooses this life. Then you remember you didn't. At age 12, things escalate. You're assigned to live with an older boy, usually around 18. He's your mentor, your brother in arms, your part-time bully, part-time protector. He teaches you how to throw a javelin, how to avoid getting stabbed, and how to sleep in the cold without shivering. Tip: think warm thoughts and pretend you're dead. He also introduces you to Spartan music. Slow, haunting flute melodies used to keep time during marches. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, like a lullaby sung before battle. There's no room for romance, except there kind of is. In Sparta, male-male mentorship relationships are common, even encouraged. They say it builds loyalty, bonds forged in sweat and bruises. It's not exactly about love, but it's not about connection either. Historians still debate how deeply emotional or physical these relationships were. Spartan sources are vague. On purpose? Probably. You're too tired to care. You just want a blanket. You're 15 when you're sent into the wild alone. No food, no tools, just your cloak and your training. This is your final test. Survive, thrive, or disappear. You steal a rabbit. You build a fire. You sleep under a bush that smells like goat pee. You make it 3 days before getting caught sneaking into a farmer's orchard. You get flogged. You don't cry. Congratulations. At 20, you're considered a man. You join the Syssitia, a communal mess hall where Spartan men eat together every day for the rest of their lives. You contribute food or money. You debate politics. You're still on call for war. You've earned your spot in Sparta's war machine. Your body is a weapon. Your loyalty is absolute. And your dreams are now mostly just battle drills and boiled pork. You're not sure who you used to be. There's no room for poetry here. No space for philosophy or drama. Sparta doesn't build statues of poets. It builds soldiers. Still, you hear rumors that across the mountains, in Athens, they spend afternoons in gymnasiums, debating ideas and lounging under fig trees. That some boys get to question authority without being punched in the face for it. You scoff. But you also wonder. Then the horns blow. You're being deployed. Real war. Real enemies. Real stakes. Your hands tighten around your spear. You take your place in the phalanx, shoulder to shoulder, with men who've sweated beside you for over a decade. There's no fear here, only formation, only discipline, only Sparta. The oracle of confusion. You've marched, you've trained, you've dodged spears and philosophy lectures alike. And now you're climbing up rocky steps, through mountain fog that clings to your tunic like wet bread. Your legs are sore. Your sandals are one bad step away from becoming history. But you're not here for comfort. You're here for answers. And unfortunately, the person with those answers speaks in riddles and may or may not be high on volcanic gas. Welcome to Delphi. You've heard of this place your whole life. People come from all over the Greek world. Kings, generals, poets, sheep farmers with unusually large questions, to ask the oracle what the gods think of their plans. Should we go to war? Will my crops survive? Does my neighbor know I stole his donkey? Delphi sits on the side of Mount Parnassus, nestled above a yawning valley, surrounded by laurel trees and stone terraces. It smells like thyme, incense, and faintly of goat. The sacred spring bubbles nearby. Pilgrims wash their hands in the cold water. You try it, immediately regret it. The water is cold enough to give your soul a cramp, but that's part of the charm. You're not here for spas. You're here to hear the voice of Apollo. You enter the Temple of Apollo, a large marble structure with tall Doric columns, each one humming with an ancient stillness. Inside, the temperature drops. Torches flicker against the stone. A line of petitioners stands in silence, waiting their turn. At the far end, beneath a gold and ivory statue of the god himself, is the Pythia, the oracle. She's seated on a tripod, her body swaying gently. Laurel leaves in her lap, her eyes rolled slightly upward, as if she's listening to a very old song only she can hear. Someone leans over and whispers, "She chews bay leaves." You nod like you knew that. They add, "and sits above a crack in the earth that leaks hallucinogenic fumes." You nod slower. It's finally your turn. You kneel. Your question, rehearsed for days, catches in your throat. The priest, standing nearby, speaks for her as she begins to whisper, fast, low, and broken. He translates. The river bends, but the stone remains. Choose not the straight path, lest you bleed. You blink. You were going to ask whether to take a job offer in Corinth. Instead, you got the ancient Greek version of a cryptic tweet. That's the thing about oracles. They're never clear. You don't get straight yes or no answers. You get metaphors, riddles, haiku with trust issues. Still, people take these words seriously. Entire wars are launched based on 3 lines muttered between laurel burps. Historians still debate what exactly the Pythia was inhaling. Some say ethylene gas. Others say she entered a trance from spiritual ecstasy. Still others argue she was just very committed to the bit. Whatever the case, people believed her. Because Delphi was more than just a temple. It was the center of the world. Literally, there's a stone here, the omphalos, shaped like a big egg and covered in net-like carvings. It's said to mark the belly button of the earth. Legend says that Zeus released 2 eagles from opposite ends of the world. They met here, right above this rock. You touch it briefly. It's smooth, worn by centuries of hands and hope. You stick around. Delphi isn't just an oracle. It's a pan-Hellenic sanctuary, a place where Greeks of all city-states come to mingle, compete, and humble brag. There are Pythian games held every 4 years, music contests, poetry recitals, wrestling matches where the men oil themselves up and pretend it's about honor. You watch a lyre competition and quietly wonder if that one guy's just playing Stairway to Olympus. One day, you overhear a Spartan general consulting the oracle about invading a neighboring city. The oracle responds, "A great kingdom will fall." He grins, marches to war, loses everything. Oops. Turns out, the oracle was right. Just vague. That's the Delphi special. Always correct. Rarely helpful. Still, you find yourself coming back, not always to ask questions. Sometimes, just to sit beneath the stone terrace, watching the fog roll through the valley. It's a sacred place, not because gods speak, but because humans listen. You realize that the oracle isn't about certainty. It's about permission to act in the face of uncertainty. You want to believe someone knows the path, even if the directions are written in interpretive dance. On your last day, you carve a message into a nearby stone. Something modest, a reminder. Even if the answer is weird, you still have to make the choice. You leave before anyone sees you do it. But maybe, someday, someone else will sit here, wondering what to do, and smile at that. You hike down the mountain, feet blistered, soul a little lighter. You're no wiser, just more comfortable being confused. And that's progress. A philosopher walks into a gymnasium. You're sweating, not the noble, post-battle kind of sweat. The kind that happens when you're stuck in a crowded gymnasium, surrounded by men in various stages of undress. And you're unsure if this is a fitness class or a philosophical ambush. Turns out, it's both. Welcome to Athens, again. But this time, not as a city under siege or smoking rubble. Today, Athens is calm, curious, and slightly pretentious. And in the middle of all this marble and muscle, Socrates. He doesn't look like much. You've heard of him, of course. Everyone has. But you expected something more. Robes, aura, a little floating. Maybe a bird perched on his shoulder, whispering eternal truths. Instead, he looks like a stone mason who lost a fight with a clay oven. Bald, barefoot, his face a chaotic blend of wrinkles and nose. He's got the physique of someone who forgot what bread tastes like, but somehow still radiates an unsettling confidence. He's not lifting weights, he's lifting questions and dropping them like they're hot. You're trying to enjoy a casual conversation about javelin technique when Socrates slides over like a philosophical raccoon, eyes twinkling with mischief. So, he says, you think you know what strength is? You blink. I guess. Define it. You open your mouth. You close your mouth. A bead of sweat slides down your spine as you realize you're being interrogated. This is how Socrates operates. He never gives answers, just questions. Relentless, layered, maddening questions. He'll ask you what justice is, then question your definition, then question your questioning. Then, just when you think you've nailed it, he'll ask, and is that always true? You want to scream. Instead, you nod slowly, pretending you totally knew that answer was a trap. Some call it the Socratic method. Others call it emotional warfare in a toga. But here's the thing. It works. It's not about being right. It's about unlearning certainty. It's about sitting in the discomfort of not knowing and realizing. That's where growth begins. Socrates says, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. You write that down, then immediately lose the papyrus in a gust of wind. You think that's probably symbolic. You start following him around, not in a creepy way, more like, I accidentally joined a philosophical cult, and now I'm eating olives while questioning morality in a public square. Socrates doesn't teach in a classroom. He teaches everywhere. Under trees, in bathhouses, at dinner parties where he refuses wine and stares into the fire like it owes him money. People call him a gadfly, always buzzing, annoying, forcing the sluggish horse of the Athenian state to keep moving. He doesn't care about wealth or fame or hygiene, apparently. He cares about truth, even if it ruins your day. One afternoon, he's debating a local politician who claims to know what virtue is. 10 minutes later, the guy's crying into his lunch. Socrates pats him on the back and says, "This is good. You're beginning to think." You wonder if that's true, or if he's just socially tone deaf. Either way, it works. The city doesn't quite know what to do with him. He's too clever to ignore, too poor to bribe, too weird to kill. Yet, he talks to slaves and senators the same way. He mocks the playwrights. He befriends street kids. He questions the gods, not by blasphemy, but by analysis. And he keeps repeating one idea. An unexamined life is not worth living. That one sticks with you. It makes your stomach twist in the best way, like your mind just grew another muscle. You ask him once if he believes in anything at all. He shrugs. "I believe in the power of questions." You ask if that ever gets lonely. He laughs, but doesn't answer. Later you meet some of his followers. They call themselves students. But Socrates insists he's not a teacher. There's Plato, intense and brooding, always scribbling notes and drawing diagrams on walls. There's Xenophon, who looks like he'd rather be at war, but still shows up. And a few others who orbit Socrates like anxious moons. They all say the same thing. He changes how you think. Not what you think, how. You try it yourself. Next time someone asks your opinion on a play, you respond with 3 questions and a thoughtful grunt. You don't make any friends, but you do get a free fig. Progress. But not everyone loves the Socratic revolution. Some Athenians find him dangerous, not because he's violent or political, because he makes people feel uncertain. And uncertain people start questioning the state, the gods, the systems that prop them up. And no one likes that. Still, he walks the city like it's his personal sandbox, barefoot, calm, laughing softly as you stumble through another debate about whether courage can exist without fear. You tell him your head hurts. He says, "Good. That means you're finally using it." Then he steals your olive. You never quite win an argument with Socrates, but you stop fearing the moment when you're wrong. You learn to sit with it, unpack it, ask why, and suddenly, the world isn't solid anymore. It's fluid, messy, and somehow more beautiful. One evening, you watch him walk through the marketplace, completely uninterested in the rows of goods. A merchant shouts, "Don't you want anything?" Socrates smiles. "How many things I can look at without needing?" You chuckle, then realize you've accidentally started quoting him. Welcome to the club. Trial by philosophy. You never thought you'd end up in court again. Not like this. Not sitting on a stone bench. In the middle of a sun-bleached Athenian square, surrounded by 1,000 fellow citizens, sweat sticking to your tunic, as you squint toward the center platform. Because today, the man on trial is Socrates, and for once, he's not the one asking questions. The agora buzzes. You can feel it in your chest, like bees nesting in your rib cage. Everyone's murmuring, debating, speculating. The bakers, the basket weavers, the half-drunk philosophers, all gathered like it's some kind of intellectual blood sport. The charges? Impiety, disrespecting the gods of the city, corrupting the youth, basically for making teenagers too clever and impossible to parent. You kind of see their point. Ever since you started hanging around Socrates, you've questioned your breakfast, your government, and whether time is real. So yes, corruption. Sort of. You shift uncomfortably on the bench. A piece of straw pokes your tie. The judge bangs a staff for quiet. Socrates, in the middle of it all, stands barefoot as usual. Arms crossed, unbothered. He doesn't look like a man on trial. He looks like someone who's about to win a dinner debate. The prosecution opens strong. A man named Miletus, who looks like he's been fuming for a decade straight, accuses Socrates of twisting young minds into moral spaghetti. He makes them believe the gods aren't real. He teaches them to defy tradition. He said virtue might be a process, not a destination. Gasps. Several jurors clutch their tunics. You whisper to the guy next to you, "I think Miletus just got owned by grammar." Then it's Socrates' turn, and instead of pleading, apologizing, or even defending himself like a normal person, he starts questioning his accusers. Of course. What is piety? Do you know it, or merely repeat it? If I corrupt the youth, who improves them? The courtroom turns into an open-air philosophy seminar. At one point, he casually compares himself to a gadfly, sent by the gods to sting the sluggish horse of Athens into motion. You nearly applaud. The jury frowns. He gets bolder. He claims his mission was divinely inspired. That a friend once asked the oracle at Delphi who the wisest man in Greece was. And the oracle answered, Socrates. Socrates insists he couldn't possibly be wise. So he set out to find someone wiser. And in doing so, he discovered that nobody really knows anything. Not poets, not craftsmen, not politicians. Especially not politicians. You snort a little too loudly. A guard eyes you. Socrates says he never claimed to teach. He says he has no doctrines. He says he only helps others examine themselves, their beliefs, and their lives. You hear murmurs. Not all of them are supportive. Some in the crowd think he's arrogant. Some think he's dangerous. Some are just annoyed their sons now quote him instead of working in the vineyard. Athens has changed since the war. The plague, the loss, the grief. It's made the city fragile, twitchy, less tolerant of people who rock boats. And Socrates, he's made a career of boat rocking. The vote is cast. You stare at your pebble for a long time. The black one means guilty. The white one, not guilty. You pick up the white one, so do many others, but not enough. The verdict, Guilty by a narrow margin. Now comes the sentencing. Socrates could beg for mercy, offer to pay a fine, maybe promise to shut up for a while. Instead, he says he should be rewarded with free meals in the Prytaneon, like Olympic victors and civic heroes. You watch a juror choke on his own rage. The final vote isn't close this time. The sentence is death. You follow him outside after the trial. A small group of students trails behind, silent, stunned. Socrates smiles gently. Well, he says, either death is a dreamless sleep or a chance to meet other thinkers. You try to speak, nothing comes out. He waves it off. This is not a tragedy. You beg him to flee. Others do too. Offer bribes, boats, disguises. He refuses them all. If I ran now, what would I teach? Days pass. Then you're in the prison, sitting on a cool stone bench. The cup is brought in. Hemlock, cloudy and thick. He jokes about how bitter it'll taste. Then he drinks it. No shaking, no tears. He lies down. He speaks until his voice fades, then silence. Later, the city feels quieter, not physically, philosophically, like someone turned off the constant buzz of discomfort that made people better. You hear his words in the rustling of trees. You dream of his questions. You look at your life and wonder, is it examined enough? Historians still debate whether Athens executed Socrates out of fear, politics, or just bad timing. Some say it was necessary. Others say it was the beginning of Athens' moral decline. You remember his smile, and you whisper to the wind, the unexamined life is not worth living. And now you live. Plato's weird cave obsession. It's been a while since Socrates drank the poison. And you're still not okay. There are moments when you swear you hear his voice in your sleep, poking at your brain like a broomstick. Are you sure you're awake? Are you sure you even exist? Thanks for that, Socrates. But today, you're sitting in a quiet olive grove, listening to Plato, his most intense student, scratch diagrams into the dirt, like he's mapping out the human soul with a stick. You ask him what he's drawing. He looks up with fire in his eyes and says, shadows. Of course, Plato is taller than you expected, slim, serious, with the kind of hair that makes you believe he hasn't smiled in about 4 years. He started his own school, the Academy, named after the hero Academus. But really, it should be called Plato's Department of Confusing but Important Ideas. It's not like the Agog. There are no spears or foxes or angry boot stomping. Instead, there's scrolls, arguments, walking in circles, and an endless supply of hypotheticals. You've been sitting here for 2 hours, and all you know is that reality might not be real. Plato draws a cave. It's got prisoners chained facing a wall. Behind them, a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners, puppeteers casting shadows on the wall. The prisoners think those shadows are reality because it's all they've ever seen. Then Plato says, imagine one prisoner gets free. He turns around, sees the fire, sees the puppeteers. Eventually, he climbs out of the cave, blinded by sunlight, and sees the real world. The truth. You ask, is this about politics? He nods. You ask, or the soul? He nods again. You ask, or just bad lighting? He nods a third time, slower. This is Plato's theory of forms. He believes that everything in this world, the stuff you can touch, taste, and trip over, is just an imperfect reflection of some perfect, eternal form. You see a chair? That's just chairish. The real form of chairness exists in a higher realm you can't see. Same for justice, beauty, courage, even bread. So, if you've ever looked at a loaf of bread and thought, something's missing, congratulations, you're a Platonist. It's infuriating, but also kind of beautiful. Plato believes there's a deeper truth, a pure version of everything, waiting to be discovered, not just by faith, but by reason. He wants you to use your mind like a chisel, carving away illusions until you find something that actually lasts. You ask if that includes emotions. He sighs. Yes, he says, especially emotions. You attend one of his lectures. It's called The Republic. A few scrolls in, you're already dizzy. He's designing the ideal state, a just society run by philosopher kings who hate money and don't own property, and apparently don't even get to pick their romantic partners. You raise your hand, but doesn't that sound awful? Plato smiles sadly. It's not about what feels good. It's about what's good. You pretend to write that down. Instead, you doodle a small stick figure running out of the cave and screaming. Some people love Plato. Others think he's too uptight. Aristotle, his future student, will eventually accuse him of being too abstract, too obsessed with invisible truths. But for now, Plato's the voice of a city trying to find its soul after war, plague, and one very public philosopher funeral. At dinner, Plato eats quietly. Everything on his plate is in neat, equal portions. When he talks, it's with the weight of someone who's constantly imagining a better world and quietly disappointed this one exists. You ask if he believes in love. He blinks. Then softly, he recites part of his dialogue, the symposium, where love is described as a ladder from physical attraction to appreciation of beauty, to the love of pure truth. You chew your lentils and say, so, foreplay for the soul. He does not laugh, but he doesn't throw his wine at you. So that's progress. One day he takes you aside and says, I'm writing down everything I can remember about Socrates. You nod. He pauses. But it's not really about him. It's about what he started. That's the thing about Plato. He's not just preserving the past. He's designing a blueprint for the future. You remember the cave again. And you wonder, if you turned around now, really turned around, what would you see? Are you still staring at shadows? And if you walked out into the sun, would you even recognize the light? Historians still debate how much of Plato's work reflects Socrates' actual teachings, And how much is Plato just rebranding his mentor into a mythical figure? Some say he was the first true philosopher. Others say he was just the world's most poetic control freak. You're just trying to figure out if your lunch is a shadow of a sandwich or a form in disguise. Either way, you're getting smarter or more confused, which is weirdly the same thing. Aristotle ruins your simplicity. Plato had you convinced that the universe was made of invisible chairs, and you were living in a cave of lies. And just when your brain had gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable, Aristotle shows up and blows it all to bits. You meet him in Lyceum, a shady grove outside Athens, where birds chirp too loudly and students shuffle around like confused philosophers in training. He's walking in circles, dictating notes to a student who's desperately trying not to trip over a tree root. And when he sees you, Aristotle doesn't shake your hand. He just says, everything in nature has a purpose. You haven't even sat down yet. You spend your first week trying to figure him out. Where Plato was poetic, Aristotle is methodical. Where Plato stared into caves, Aristotle catalogs the shadows and asks how fast they move, what they're made of, and whether they taste like chicken. He's sharp, curious, and just a little smug, but in the way you kind of respect. He once studied under Plato for 20 years, and now he disagrees with half of it. According to Aristotle, those perfect forms Plato keeps going on about, they don't exist somewhere in a celestial Dropbox. They're right here, in the objects themselves, in the essence of things. A rock is a rock because it behaves like a rock, not because it's trying to be some platonic ideal of rockness, TM, floating in metaphysical space. You feel personally attacked. You like the cave. Aristotle builds his world from the bottom up. He observes, classifies, divides, dissects. He's invented a system to categorize everything: animals, plants, politics, ethics, even types of friendship. You're currently stuck between utility-based and just here for the olives. He's like the human version of a well-organized filing cabinet with a philosophical soul. And his motto? Let's figure it out. You follow him through the garden, notebook in hand. He points to bees and talks about purpose, how every living thing aims for something, a goal, a final cause. Telos, he calls it, the idea that everything strives to fulfill its nature. A seed aims to become a tree. A harpist aims to play music. You aim to understand why your feet hurt. He asks, what's the telos of a human? You think for a moment. To eat figs. He sighs. No, he says. To reason. To live well. To achieve eudaimonia. Human flourishing. And here's where things get intense. Because living well isn't just about feeling good. It's about doing good consistently through practice. Not luck, not inspiration, habit. You don't become virtuous by reading about courage. You become courageous by doing brave things until it becomes second nature. You gulp. That sounds exhausting. He calls it the doctrine of the mean. Every virtue lies between two extremes. Courage is the balance between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lies between stinginess and wastefulness. Patience lives somewhere between apathy and rage, texting your enemies. You look at your life and realize you've been ping-ponging between extremes since puberty. Time to aim for the middle. Aristotle nods approvingly. He also gets political. Aristotle thinks humans are zoon politikon, political animals, not because we vote or riot, but because we live in communities. He studies different governments, monarchies, aristocracies, democracies, tyrannies, and tries to figure out which ones actually work. Spoiler, none of them perfectly. But his main point is this: the state exists to help people live well, not just to control them. You scribble that down, then underline it 3 times. Then immediately wonder if Athens will ever figure that out. At dinner, Aristotle is more relaxed. He loves biology, especially sea creatures. He once spent years observing cuttlefish. He talks about the shape of the moon, the logic of syllogisms. He says things like, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, you interrupt. He drank hemlock. He stares at you. Then, very slowly, smiles. You're learning. Historians still debate how much of Aristotle's philosophy was meant to oppose Plato, or just refine him. Some see him as the first true scientist. Others think he drowned philosophy in footnotes. But you realize that Aristotle doesn't destroy simplicity. He asks you to earn it. And suddenly, you're looking at the world differently, not as a blurry cave wall of illusions, but as a collection of things, real, messy, purposeful, each trying to be what it's meant to be, even you. So the next time you trip on a stone, instead of cursing it, you pick it up and ask, "What's your purpose?" And in the silence, you hear yourself whisper, maybe the same as mine, to learn, to become, to flourish, love, war, and Greek drama. You're sitting in a massive outdoor theater, carved into the side of a hill, and someone screaming about marrying their own mother. It's just another Thursday in Athens. Welcome to the city Dionysia, a festival that combines wine, religious devotion, questionable costume choices, and the kind of emotional trauma that would make modern therapists weep with professional joy. This isn't just entertainment, it's Greek drama. And somehow, it's the most honest thing you've seen in years. The sun's still rising, and the theater is already full. Men, women, sitting way up in the back. Citizens, visitors, and a few goats, because someone clearly missed the part where this is not a picnic. Your tunic is dusty. You haven't slept, but you're here because today a man named Sophocles is going to rip your soul out, wave it in front of your face, and gently ask, "Do you see yourself yet?" No pressure. The chorus enters in synchronized stomps, and suddenly You're being pulled into the tragic spiral of Oedipus, king, hero, solver of riddles, also unknowingly married to his mother and destined to gouge his eyes out with a brooch. You flinch. Someone behind you whispers, "Symbolism." You whisper back, "Trauma." This is Greek theater. Loud, brutal, poetic, and deeply reflective. Three main genres. Tragedy, the kind where everyone learns something, but also everyone dies. Comedy, the kind where everyone's naked or pretending to be birds. Satyr plays, weird in-between sketches that feel like someone drank too much and put on a wig. And the people love it. Even the grumpy Spartan ambassador sitting beside you snorts when the chorus starts imitating a thunderstorm with bronze cymbals and yelling about fate. You're all crying together by the end. It's a bonding thing. Later, you wander the festival grounds. There's dancing, singing, and the smell of roasted lamb. There's also a man wearing a wooden phallus, 3 feet long, yelling about Athenian politics. You stare. Aristophanes. Someone whispers. You nod. Of course it is. His play, Lysistrata, is starting. The premise? The women of Athens and Sparta unite and refuse sex until the men end the war. You are not emotionally prepared. It's hilarious, subversive, kind of genius. People are howling with laughter, including the old generals. Even you're laughing until you realize how painfully accurate it is. Underneath the jokes, there's truth. War is stupid, and sometimes the only wisdom comes from the people no one listens to. You sip diluted wine and look around at the city. This is what Athenian culture does best. Wraps deep questions in beautiful words. Wrapped again in absurdity, then flings it into your lap and says, "Figure it out." You meet a woman named Aspasia, a witty intellectual who debates better than half the philosophers you know. She's not allowed to act in the plays, or vote, or speak in the assembly, but she's teaching rhetoric to some of the best minds in the city. You ask how she puts up with it. She smirks. "I don't need a stage to shape a generation." You want to write that on a temple. As the days blur together, you begin to realize that Greek drama isn't just for catharsis. It's civic therapy. Athenians don't bottle up guilt, grief, or shame. They project it onto kings and queens and gods with daddy issues. And by watching others suffer, they cleanse themselves. The word is catharsis. You feel it in your chest like a thunderclap. One night, after a tragedy about a soldier who returns home too late, you walk home under a sky so full of stars, it feels like the gods are eavesdropping. You pass the temple of Dionysus, and for once, the god of wine and madness feels wise. Maybe madness is part of clarity. Maybe laughter and tears are just different notes in the same chord. Historians still debate whether these plays were spiritual, political, or just really expensive crowd pleasers. You You've seen the way people change walking out of the theater, the way men cry without shame, the way women laugh without fear, the way, for just a moment, everyone feels something deeply and together. Later, you try writing a short play yourself. You call it The Man Who Thought Too Much and Got a Rash. It doesn't win any prizes, but you feel braver anyway, because even if no one claps, you're learning to speak, to feel, to perform your own tragedy, and still stand when the chorus leaves the stage. So you keep coming back. You sit in the same spot, week after week. Sometimes it's a love story. Sometimes it's a tale of hubris. Sometimes someone turns into a swan and no one questions it. But every time, you walk away with a little more light inside. Because the Greeks, they don't just tell stories, they live them. The Peloponnesian gut punch. You've just been handed a spear, a dented helmet, and a week's worth of barley cakes that taste like regret, which can only mean one thing. Athens and Sparta are finally done flirting and have gone to war. It's called the Peloponnesian War, but it should really be called the world's most exhausting divorce. And you're in the middle of it. At first, it feels like this might be noble. You march in crisp lines. The city cheers. Someone hands you a fig. The commanders say things like strategy and honor and defending our way of life. They tell you Sparta started it. You overhear Spartans saying the same thing about Athens. You quickly realize this isn't about heroes or justice. It's about ego, two ancient superpowers. One stage, no chill. You know the basics. Athens, naval power, democracy, drama. Sparta, land power, oligarchy, abbeys of granite. And for years, they circled each other like passive-aggressive roommates. But now, the gloves are off. And it's personal. The war drags on. There's sieges. There's betrayals. There's a brief moment where you think peace is coming. Then someone ruins it by throwing a wine jug during a treaty meeting. Okay, maybe that was you. You live on rations and rumors. Some days, you guard the city walls. Other days, you row in the trireme. Your back screaming with every stroke. 1 month, you get stationed near Pylos, and you witness something almost funny. A group of elite Spartan warriors get trapped on an island, surrounded by Athenian forces. They surrender. Spartans surrendering. You blink like it's a dream. Even the Athenians don't know how to react. Half of them celebrate. The other half suspect witchcraft. But the victories don't last. The war mutates. It goes from epic to petty, from grand speeches to poisoned wells, and then plague. It hits Athens like a fist. One moment you're stacking shields. The next, people are dying in the streets. You hear coughing, screaming. Prayers shouted to empty skies. Bodies line the temples. The agora goes quiet. The gods go silent. Even Pericles, the golden-voiced leader of Athens, dies. And in his absence, the city forgets who it is. Morale crumbles. Philosophers retreat to their scrolls. Playwrights write tragedies no one wants to watch. And you? You just try to stay alive. You eat whatever doesn't move. You sleep wherever you're not being stabbed. You watch old friends argue whether it's worth it anymore. You stare at the shield on your lap and wonder what you're really protecting. Years pass. Peace comes, then breaks, then comes again, shoddier, like a broken plate, glued back together by blind lawyers. And then there's Alcibiades, beautiful, brilliant, treacherous, a walking disaster with the charm of a god and the ethics of a dropped sword. He convinces Athens to invade Sicily. You go because everyone else does. You arrive, everything goes wrong. The Sicilian expedition is one of the biggest face plants in military history. Boats lost, troops scattered, horses running in circles. You end up swimming for your life, armor dragging you down. The water tastes like copper and shame. Back home, things only get worse. Athens loses its fleet. Sparta makes a shady alliance with Persia. Democracy teeters. Oligarchs rise. And one by one, cities fall. You try to hold on to hope, but it slips through your fingers like sand. Then it happens. The final siege. Spartan ships blockade the port. Food runs out. People eat leather, pets, and hope. You're sitting on a rooftop one morning, watching the horizon. When the white flags go up, it's over. Athens has lost. The city is stripped, walls torn down. The empire gone. You walk the silent streets, past burned homes and shuttered theaters. You see a statue of Athena, chipped, graffitied, forgotten, and still, somehow, standing. Historians still debate who was at fault. Did Athens get too arrogant? Did Sparta get too ruthless? Was the whole war a slow-motion mistake? You just remember the sound of a fellow soldier sobbing into his hands after the final surrender, and how no poem or speech can quite fix that sound. You thought war would make you braver. It made you older, more skeptical, more tired, but also more awake. You don't believe in glory anymore, but you believe in survival, and sometimes that's enough. You visit Socrates' old haunt, the stone bench, where he used to torment politicians with logic. You sit, you breathe, and when a child passes by and asks, "Why did Athens fall?" you just say, "Because we forgot what made us wise." Alexander shows up. You're sitting at a campfire somewhere in Macedon, thinking life can't get more complicated than watching Athens fall apart. And then a 12-year-old rides by on a horse that hates everyone, including him. He's not screaming. He's not flailing. He's holding on with terrifying calm. And the horse, massive, black as midnight, muscles flexing like a divine sculpture, finally obeys. The boy dismounts, brushes dust off his tunic, and shrugs. His name's Bucephalus. You just met Alexander, and the world will never be the same again. Macedon wasn't supposed to matter. It was a rough, half-barbarian kingdom up north, with too many vowels and not enough culture. To Athenians, It was the hillbilly cousin you didn't invite to the symposium. Then came Philip the Cat, Alexander's dad. Philip reformed the army. He invented long spears, tight formations, ruthless strategies. He conquered half of Greece, while everyone was still arguing about tax laws and chorus roles. And just when things were looking stable, Philip gets assassinated at a wedding. Alexander, barely 20, takes the throne and immediately starts preparing to invade the world. Because why not? You remember your first real conversation with him. You're both sitting in a dusty tent, eating dates. And you ask, why Persia? He doesn't even blink. Because they said I couldn't. Alexander is strange in the way comets are strange. Brilliant, fast, and very possibly dangerous to stand near. He was taught by Aristotle, so he knows philosophy, but he prefers action. Where Plato pondered justice, Alexander personally throws spears through injustice at 30 mapates. The campaign begins. You cross the Hellespont into Asia. He stops at Troy, lays a wreath on Achilles' tomb, whispers something to the wind. You realize he doesn't just want to win, he wants to become myth. First stop, Battle of Granicus. Persian satraps line up with chariots and smug faces. They outnumber you. They've got the river, they've got armor. Alexander doesn't care. He charges uphill into the river, sword out, surrounded by cavalry. You watch him fight like a tornado wrapped in bronze. Victory. You blink and realize this is going to keep happening. Next, Issus, Darius III, the king of kings, shows up. Massive army, sparkly chariot, enough backup dancers to open a Broadway show. You're terrified. Alexander charges anyway. Flanking maneuver, direct strike. Darius flees. You raid his tent afterward. You find silk, gold, and letters he never sent, and his mother, who mistakes Alexander for the king and apologizes. He laughs and forgives her. You don't understand this kid at all. Cities fall like dominoes. Tyre, besieged for 7 months. Alexander builds a literal causeway into the sea to reach it. Gaza, brutal. Egypt, welcoming. They crown him pharaoh. He founds a city on the Nile, Alexandria. He sketches the plans himself, because of course he does. One night, in the desert, he visits the oracle of Siwa. No one knows what was said, but when he comes back, he starts acting like he's divine. Not cool haircut divine, son of Zeus divine. You raise an eyebrow. He raises an empire. Then comes Gaugamela, Darius's rematch. More troops, more horses, more chariots with spikes. Doesn't matter. Alexander's army moves like a knife through warm butter. Darius runs again. And this time, Alexander doesn't just win a battle. He becomes king of Asia. You start to notice things. He stops wearing Greek armor. He starts dressing like a Persian king. He holds court in silk tents, surrounded by eunuchs and incense. His soldiers grumble. You grumble. He doesn't care. He's not playing by Greek rules anymore. He's rewriting them. You travel through Babylon, Susa, Persepolis. You get lost in the palaces. Rooms full of gold, rugs so soft you consider marrying one. And then one night, drunk, Alexander burns Persepolis to the ground. Some say it was revenge for the Persian sack of Athens. Others say it was the wine, or the company of a Persian dancer who whispered to him about justice and fire. Historians still debate it. You just remember the heat on your face and the way he watched the flames like they were old friends. He starts marrying off his men to Persian women. He takes a Persian bride himself. Some call it diplomacy, others call it madness. You're too tired to argue. You catch him staring at maps a lot, but not Greek maps. Maps of India, because Alexander doesn't stop. He doesn't understand the word enough. He wants the edge of the world, the last river, the final dawn. And you're still following him, because something in you believes if you stand close enough to greatness, maybe some of it rubs off. You're not the same person anymore. You used to care about logic, drama, reason. Now you're just trying not to die before breakfast. You still ask questions, but most of them are about survival. You wonder if that makes you wiser or just older. One morning, Alexander turns to you and says, "I dreamt I touched the ocean's edge." You nod, but you don't say the thing you're both thinking. And what then? Because deep down you know, this ride doesn't end with a crown. It ends when the horse finally stops galloping. And you're not sure anyone, not even Alexander, knows how to get off. Desert marches and elephant fears. It's hot. Not beach day, hot. Not sunburn, hot. It's soul leaving your body through your sweat pores. Hot. You're stumbling across the Gadrosian desert. Somewhere between Alexander has a plan and Alexander might be a lunatic. The sand is sharp. The sky is cruel. Your boots are basically memories. And there's a good chance you won't make it to sundown. This is the price of chasing infinity. It wasn't supposed to go like this. The army had just reached India, the edge of the world, or so you thought. You expected elephants, spices, and a polite pat on the back from the gods. Instead, you found resistance, rainstorms, and an entire ecosystem trying to kill you. Let's rewind. You cross the Hindu Kush. The mountains loom like stone judges. The air gets thinner. The men get quieter. Alexander rides ahead like a demigod, untouched by frost or doubt. You slip on a rock and almost die. Again, it's fine. Everything's fine. Then come the rivers, each one wider than the last. The Hydaspes nearly swallows the army. On the other side, elephants, massive, armored, trombone-trumpeting elephants. You're told they're war-trained. You believe it when one picks up a Macedonian and flings him like a grape. You're frozen. You fought Persians. You faced famine. But this is new. The battle begins under monsoon clouds. Alexander, ever the tactician, flanks the elephant line with cavalry. It's messy, terrifying, and borderline cinematic. You dodge tusks, you stab a leg, you get stepped on, mildly, but somehow you win. King Porus, the man who commanded the elephants, surrenders with dignity. Alexander, impressed, asks how he wishes to be treated. Porus replies, "Like a king." Alexander grins. "Then you shall be one." You nod. That's fair. Also, Porus is enormous and terrifying. After the battle, you expect the march to end. Alexander doesn't. He wants to go further east. The army doesn't. There's a mutiny brewing. You hear whispers in the night. Tired, homesick voices. Even Bucephalus looks annoyed. Finally, after some spectacular pouting and awkward silence, Alexander relents. But instead of taking the safer northern route, he leads you through the Gadrosian desert. No one knows why. Some say it's to outdo Cyrus the Great. Others say it's punishment. You say it's insanity, with a side of heat stroke. The march is brutal. Water disappears, so do men. You see seasoned warriors fall beside their own shadows, too tired to speak. You drink from muddy footprints. You eat dried dates and pretend they're food. The sun mocks you. Time warps. You're no longer a soldier. You're just a walking thirst with regrets. One day, a supply train arrives. Some of Alexander's personal guards scoop up precious water. They offer him a helmet full. He takes it and pours it into the sand. No speech, no drama, just solidarity. You kind of want to cry. You don't have enough water left to cry. By the time you reach civilization again, you've lost half the army. No one cheers. No songs are sung. You just sit in the dirt and stare at a goat for 3 hours. The goat wins the staring contest, but it's not over. Alexander begins rebuilding. He marries Roxana, a Sogdian noblewoman. You attend the wedding, mostly for the snacks. There are dancers, wine, and rumors. Some say he's planning to merge East and West. Others say he's planning to become a god. You're planning to sleep for 5 years. Then come the elephants again. This time they're friendly. Some are even gifted to Alexander as royal tribute. You walk past them, slowly, carefully. One flaps its ears at you, like it remembers the Hydaspes. You nod respectfully. You're not making that mistake twice. Historians still debate why Alexander went so far. Ego, strategy, wanderlust. You think he needed the world to prove something about himself. Maybe that he could conquer anything. Maybe that he was more than human. Or maybe, just maybe, he was running from the silence of staying still. Either way, you survived. You, the philosopher soldier, with sand in your brain and a vague allergy to elephants. You walked through the impossible and came out different, not stronger, not wiser, just more awake. Because in the desert, under stars sharp as knives, you learned something. You don't really know who you are until the world tries to erase you. Death of a legend. You wake up one morning to whispers, low, tight, afraid. You step outside and see a line of soldiers, heads bowed. Their armor creaks like old trees. Someone grabs your arm and says, "He's sick." You don't need to ask who. There's only one he in this world now. Alexander, you rush through Babylon's heat. The palace is too quiet. The air feels stale, like it's been holding its breath since the last prophecy was uttered. You push past linen curtains, and there he is, the king, the myth, shaking, swaying, eyes half open, like he's staring at a battlefield only he can see. You think, this can't be real. You've watched him ride through storms, take arrows to the chest, tame elephants with a stare, cross deserts that chewed up entire armies. You once saw him punch a river, and now he can't lift a cup. The healers fuss. They bring strange herbs, incantations, a sheep's liver for some reason. Nothing works. Every hour, his fever climbs higher, like a sun collapsing in on itself. You sit beside him for the first time in years. He looks small, not weak, just human. And you hate it. Over the next few days, Babylon turns into a whispering mouth. Rumors swirl like gnats. Poison, old wound, too much wine, too much world. Historians still debate it. You don't. Because sometimes people just burn too brightly. The last thing he says, voice like sand, to the strongest. And then, nothing. No thunder, no lightning, no divine eagle lifting his soul skyward. Just silence and the rustle of silk as people begin backing out of the room. Not sure if they should mourn or start plotting. You walk out into the Babylonian night. There's no ceremony, no procession, just you, staring at the stars and thinking, now what? That's the question that breaks everything. Because he didn't name a successor. He didn't draw a map. He didn't leave a how to run an empire scroll under his pillow. And now, his generals, the Diadochi, circle like hungry wolves. They say, let's rule together, which lasts for about 11 seconds. Then the knives come out. The empire fractures. You watch the most loyal men you knew, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, begin carving up the world like its birthday cake. Egypt goes to one, Persia to another. Greece becomes a chessboard. You flinch every time you hear someone say legacy, because this isn't legacy, it's scraps. You travel, you visit shrines in his name. You help build a temple in Alexandria, where they claim to keep part of his cloak. But there's no body. No one knows where Alexander is buried. Not even you. Not even now. Some say he lies under glass in Egypt. Others say his tomb was hidden, stolen, swallowed by time. You sometimes dream of him, laughing on a horse made of starlight, galloping past your tent with no footprints. You never know if it's a dream or a memory. Years pass, new kings rise, new wars, new flags, new taxes. But still, when you say Alexander, people pause, even in places he never reached, even in children's bedtime stories. His name sticks, like honey or blood. You sit at a fire with a young soldier once. Years later, he asks, did you really know him? You nod. What was he like? You think and say softly, too much. And that's the truth. He loved too much, fought too much, dreamed too big, wanted the world and got it. Then found out the world wasn't enough. He wanted to be Achilles. He became something stranger, half hero, half storm. And you carry his story, not because you agreed with him, not because he was right, but because he changed you. He showed you how far a human could go, before even the stars had to say, enough. You pour out a drink one night, under the moon, not for the king, not for the conqueror, but for the boy who tamed a wild horse and whispered to the gods like they were old friends. And somewhere in the silence, you hear a hoofbeat, just one, then nothing. Philosophers go global. You're in a library now, not a musty corner in Athens, with 3 scrolls and a rude cat, but a place that smells like olive oil, ink, and ambition. This is Alexandria, not the person, the city, the one named after him. There are more Alexandrias than you can count, but this one, this is the brain. And you? You finally traded your spear for a scroll. The library is massive. You thought Athens was clever. This is next level. Shelves stretch toward the ceiling, like trees made of wisdom. Scholars mutter in multiple languages. Scribes copy texts at lightning speed, dipping reed pens into ink like they're performing surgery. You almost bump into a statue of Athena carrying a papyrus roll. You apologize to a statue. It's that kind of place. You're here because Greek thought didn't die with Alexander. It mutated. It spread. Ideas that were once whispered in dusty courtyards are now being translated into Egyptian, Aramaic, Sanskrit. It's like philosophy has gone on tour. And you're tagging along. You meet a guy named Eratosthenes. He's using shadows to measure the earth, like the whole planet. He sticks a stick in Alexandria, asks someone to do the same in Siena, and maths his way to the circumference of the globe with spooky accuracy. You ask him why. He says, because no one's done it yet. You decide to never complain about algebra again. Then there's Euclid. He's busy inventing geometry. Like, literally inventing it. You sit through one of his lectures and walk out with a nosebleed. You now know more about triangles than your ancestors knew about fire. You both respect and fear him. Meanwhile, Greek thought keeps expanding like some philosophical wildfire. They're building observatories, water clocks, even automatic doors using steam. You see a mechanical bird flapping its wings on a copper perch and ask if it's magic. No, someone says. Just physics. You whisper, same thing. You visit the museum, which is not a museum like you know it, but more like a university meets a summer camp for geniuses. They debate ethics over lunch. They argue about comets. Someone writes a play about atoms falling in love. It's chaos. It's brilliant. It's what Athens would have been if it had Wi-Fi and better funding. But even here, the old gods are starting to dim. You overhear discussions about foreign religions, new faiths, strange monotheistic whispers from the West. You feel the edges of Greek culture softening, like wine left out in the sun too long. Still, the philosophy survives. Not just the texts, but the attitude, that itch to ask questions, to poke holes in logic, to wonder why we dream and eat and fear the stars. You walk through a lecture hall one day and hear someone quoting Socrates in Egyptian. You smile. Historians still debate whether Alexandria truly preserved Greek culture or rewrote it. Some say it was a melting pot. Others say it was cultural theft. You say, isn't that what ideas do? They migrate. They evolve. They survive. You once held a spear for a city-state. Now you hold a pen for a civilization without borders. You meet a woman named Hypatia. She's not from your era, technically. She'll rise long after your time, but you hear the whispers about her work in astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, about how she refused to stop thinking, even when it killed her. And you realize, thought doesn't need permission to travel forward. It just needs someone stubborn enough to carry it. One night, you sit in the library with a candle. A papyrus scroll rests in your lap. It's a list of questions you still don't have answers to. What is justice? Is the soul real? Do the gods care? You don't feel anxious anymore. You feel alive, because Athens may have burned. Sparta may have collapsed. Alexander may be dust. But this library, this thought, this curiosity, it lives, and so do you. In every question asked, in every scroll copied, in every whisper of logic in the dark. You turn the page, ink smudges under your fingers. The air shifts. Someone sneezes in Aramaic. You grin. The world is changing. But Greek philosophy, it's no longer just Greek. It belongs to everyone. Epicurus wants you to chill. You've seen wars. You've followed kings. You've walked deserts, survived elephants, and watched libraries breathe. Now, you're in a garden. There's fig trees, a soft breeze, and bees that somehow hum in a D major scale. You lie on your back, chewing olives that taste like actual peace. A man in a loose robe wanders over, barefoot and smiling, holding a cup of watered-down wine. You don't need to fear the gods, he says. They're not paying attention anyway. You blink. He laughs. Welcome to the philosophy of Epicurus. And friend, you're about to chill harder than you've ever chilled before. Epicurus doesn't teach in marble halls or shout in marketplaces. He gathers people, anyone, in his garden outside Athens. Women, slaves, foreigners, the works. No elite barriers, no tests. Just fruit, conversation, and freedom from anxiety. His 3-step program: don't fear the gods. Don't worry about death. Be satisfied with simple things. It's like ancient self-care, minus the overpriced candles. You ask him about the soul. He says it's made of atoms, like everything else. It dissolves when you die. There's no afterlife. You flinch, but then he says, if you're not around to experience death, why worry about it? You're halfway through a fig before you realize. That makes sense. The Epicurean life is about ataraxia, a deep, unshakable peace. Not partying, not wild indulgence. That's a common mistake. People think Epicureans are all about orgies and cake. But really, it's about contentment, a glass of water, a friend, a quiet breeze, no ambition, no empire, just enough. It's unsettling at first. You've been trained to think greatness requires conquest, that you must struggle, bleed, and impress the gods just to be worthy. But now you're here, watching birds steal crumbs and you realize you've never felt more alive. There's no war here, no politics, no lectures about forms or logic. Just questions like, what brings you joy? How can we suffer less? Would you like another apricot? You accept the apricot. Still, not everyone's a fan. The Stoics think Epicureans are too soft. The Platonists think they're missing the spiritual forest for the atom-sized trees. And your old Spartan friend muttered something about philosophy turning into a picnic. Historians still debate whether Epicureanism was escapism or liberation. You shrug and take another bite of peach. Because when was the last time you watched the sun set without trying to interpret it? Epicurus has a simple rule. If it causes pain, avoid it. If it brings peace, embrace it. You test it. You stop arguing with strangers. You stop reliving old wars in your head. You stop pretending that suffering makes you virtuous. And what's left? You. And the soft hum of the garden. At night, you sleep under the fig trees. No nightmares, no regrets. Just the wind through the leaves and the memory of a laugh shared over dinner. It's quiet, and you finally understand that quiet isn't emptiness. It's freedom. One morning, a traveler enters the garden. He's pale, tense, and clutching a scroll like it owes him money. He says he's from Rome. He's heard of Epicurus. He wants answers. You hand him a grape and say, start by breathing. You don't know it yet, but his name is Lucretius. He'll write a book called On the Nature of Things, spreading Epicurus's teachings long after your dust. You watch him exhale, and for a second, you feel like the garden is growing beyond its walls. Not everything is perfect. Storms come, friends leave. The figs don't always ripen. But your joy isn't in perfection. It's in acceptance of your body, of your mind, of the weird, beautiful nonsense of being alive in a universe that probably doesn't care. And that's okay, because you do. You scribble on a wax tablet. I once served kings. Now I serve myself. And for the first time, I am full. You don't show it to anyone. You just smile and watch the sunlight hit the garden gate like a silent benediction. You'll leave one day, return to cities, to stories, to the mess of civilization. But part of you will always be in this garden, beneath the fig tree, sipping peace from a cracked cup, and realizing maybe happiness isn't something you chase. Maybe it's something you finally let yourself have. Stoics are built different. The garden fades behind you. You walk into the city again. Athens, maybe. Or Rhodes. Or even Rome by now. Time is slippery. The world is louder here. Busier. People shouting. Horses clattering. Some guy screaming about taxes on imported snails. You barely sit down with a lukewarm cup of barley tea before a voice behind you mutters. You don't control what happens, only how you respond. You turn, meet the eyes of a man who looks like he wrestled a thunderstorm and politely asked it to calm down. His name is Zeno, and buckle up, because the Stoics are here. At first glance, Stoicism seems boring. No fancy robes, no backyard figs, just intense stares and the smell of leather sandals. But the more you listen, the more it clicks. Stoics aren't emotionless. They just don't let emotions boss them around. They believe in virtue, logic, and walking through life like it's raining and you forgot your umbrella, but you don't complain. Zeno teaches in the Stoa Poikile, a colonnade painted with images of past wars, because Stoics know life isn't a garden, it's a battlefield of the soul. And you're done running from the fight. You meet other Stoics, Cleanthes, the ex-boxer who now writes poetry about stars, Chrysippus, who allegedly wrote over 700 scrolls and still had time to troll other philosophers, and Epictetus, a former slave who teaches you something no one ever has. They can take your body, your name, your future, but your mind? That's always yours. You stare at him, jaw half open. He grins and hands you a list titled Things You Can't Control. Other people, the weather, your past, your eventual, inevitable, totally confirmed death. Underneath it, things you can control. How you think, how you act, how much you let Twitter ruin your day. His words may vary. You try it. First, you stub your toe on a temple step. Instead of yelling, you whisper, I accept this suffering. It feels stupid, but weirdly empowering. Next, someone insults your outfit. In the agora, you raise an eyebrow and ask, does your opinion alter my virtue? They walk away confused. You feel like a marble statue with Wi-Fi. You read Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, who writes notes to himself like, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. It sounds morbid until you realize how freeing it is. You stop procrastinating. You stop holding grudges. You stop eating figs like the universe owes you something. You test stoicism during a street riot. Shouting, clashing, chaos. You get smacked with a scroll. You breathe. This too is nature. You mutter, holding your now swollen eye. You're not calm because you're numb. You're calm because you've decided to be. But Stoicism isn't about being a doormat. It's about having a spine made of ethics and a heart tuned to reason. You still act, still speak, still fight for justice. You just don't collapse when the world doesn't behave. You once stood beside Alexander as he mapped empires. Now you stand beside a beggar who quotes Seneca while picking olives from the dirt. Both men taught you something. One showed you how to seize the world. The other teaches you how to let it go. Historians still debate whether Stoicism made people passive or resilient. You don't argue anymore. You just help a neighbor carry a broken jug across the courtyard and nod when they say, thank you. Because that's the thing about Stoicism. It's not loud, not flashy, not carved in gold. It's lived in moments, in choices, in how you treat someone when no one's watching. One night, you sit on a rooftop, watching the city lights flicker. You think about all the lives you've lived. Soldier, wanderer, student, shadow. You think about all the lives you could have lived if you hadn't let fear drive. You exhale and whisper, "Fate guides the willing, drags the unwilling." You're no longer being dragged. The next morning, a kid asks you if stoicism is about pretending nothing hurts. You smile and say, "No, it's about not letting pain decide who you are." You ruffle their hair and hand them a grape. Old habits. You walk through the agora with a calm that isn't fake. It's earned. And when someone bumps into you and mutters an apology, you say, "It's nothing, truly," and mean it, because you've stood in storms and deserts. And the only thing you ever really controlled was how you stood. Theater, science, and the everyday weird. You're back in the city, Athens maybe, but it could be Corinth or Pergamon. Honestly, the architecture is starting to blur. What doesn't blur? The noise. You wake up to merchants shouting about discounted olives, children chasing each other with sticks shaped like spears, and a goat casually eating someone's toga. It's chaotic. It's clever. It's deeply, weirdly human. And guess what? You're home. This isn't the Athens of Socrates and marble ideals anymore. This is post-imperial Greece. The philosophers still argue. The drama festivals still happen. But now, there are inventors building alarm clocks powered by water, and scientists using sunlight to melt pirate ships. Seriously, you wander into a workshop. A man named Hero of Alexandria shows you a brass ball spinning on jets of steam. You squint. Is that a machine? He grins. Technically, yes. He calls it an aeolipile. You call it a steam-powered spinny thing. Later, historians will call it the first steam engine. You nod. Neat. He offers to build one that opens temple doors automatically. You decide not to question the gods about it. Meanwhile, drama hasn't gone anywhere. You attend a play at the Theater of Dionysus. It's comedy night, and you laugh so hard, your wine comes out your nose. The jokes are sharper now, more political. There's a guy in a wig pretending to be a Spartan tax collector and getting chased off stage by a flock of papier-mâché chickens. It's pure art. You remember when Greek plays were about gods and destiny. Now they're about neighbors who won't return borrowed amphorae. And you love it, because what's more dramatic than being human? You sit with mathematicians trying to square the circle. You drink with poets who argue about whether love is a disease or divine punishment. You meet a man who's convinced the moon causes insomnia. He might be right. You meet another who swears his dreams are written in iambic pentameter. You offer him a nap. You visit the temple of Asclepius, where they heal with honey and dreams. You lie down for incubation. You wake up 3 hours later, cured of your headache and convinced you're supposed to marry a goat. Mixed results. Someone tries to explain astronomy to you using a bronze device with gears and dials. It's the Antikythera mechanism, though no one calls it that yet. It tracks the moon, eclipses, and planetary positions. You ask, "Is this magic?" They reply, "No, it's engineering." You reply, "Cool, cool." Definitely still magic. In the agora, you hear a man reciting Homer from memory while juggling lemons. Someone interrupts him to argue about Stoic ethics. The juggler shouts, "I am the ethic," and throws a lemon at him. It's poetic. You visit a public bath. There's gossip, steam, and awkward eye contact. Someone's singing an ode to clean feet. You hum along. You notice something about daily life now. Everyone is performing, not on a stage, not always for applause, but in how they dress, how they walk, how they speak. Life here is theater, and everyone's got a role. Merchant, philosopher, pickpocket, goat, and somehow it all works. You once thought greatness only lived in battles and debates. Now, you see it in a baker who makes honey cakes shaped like shields, in a teacher explaining geometry to a kid using a stick and a pile of pebbles, in a woman shouting at the moon because it's ruining her love life. Historians still debate whether Hellenistic Greece was a decline or a renaissance. Too messy? Too practical? You think it's exactly what it needed to be. Alive. You write a short play. It features a talking amphora, a lost philosopher, and a chorus of disgruntled turtles. It's performed once. The audience claps politely. One person cries. You feel weirdly proud. You're not chasing empires anymore. You're not looking for divine signs in goat livers. You're just living, learning, laughing, occasionally ducking flying lemons. And somehow that feels like progress. As the sun sets, you sit on a rooftop eating warm bread. The city glows with lantern light. Someone's playing a flute badly. A cat sits on your lap, like it owns you. You exhale. Not everything makes sense. Not everything has to. Because sometimes, the most meaningful part of civilization isn't the glory or the gods. Sometimes, it's the little things, like a joke told in a bathhouse, or a clever invention that spills water at just the right time, or the feeling that somehow, despite the chaos, you belong here. Rome copies your homework. You're walking down a street, and something feels off. The columns are Greek. The theater is Greek. The gods? Still Greek, mostly, but the accents are Latin. The helmets? Shinier. The sandals? Somehow smug. And the people? Definitely Roman. Welcome to the age where Greece becomes the blueprint, and Rome shows up with a chisel and says, "We'll take everything. Thanks." At first, it's subtle. Roman merchants quoting Aristotle to justify cheese prices. Senators debating Stoicism while wearing Greek-style cloaks. Architects sketching temples that look suspiciously familiar. Then it's not subtle at all. You hear the phrase, "Gracia capta ferum victorem cepit," whispered through the streets. Greece, though conquered, took its wild conqueror captive. In other words, Rome took the land, but Greece infected the mind. You visit a Roman bathhouse. There's marble. There's sculpture. There's a guy reading Homer aloud, while someone else exfoliates his back with a sponge on a stick. It's a whole vibe. You try not to laugh when a Roman noble lectures you on the Greek virtues, like he just invented them last Tuesday. You nod politely, while wondering if he even knows who Heraclitus was. He doesn't, but he has a statue of him in his garden. It's weird. You fought wars for democracy. Now Rome waves your philosophers around like fashion accessories. They rename your gods. Zeus becomes Jupiter. Ares becomes Mars. Aphrodite becomes Venus. Same characters, new branding. You feel like a spiritual consultant at a corporate rebrand. But then you meet Virgil. He's writing the Aeneid, a Roman epic full of Trojan refugees and divine drama. You ask him if he's ripping off Homer. He smiles and says, yes, but better. You respect the honesty. You visit Rome. It's big, loud, smells like ambition and olive oil. You hear echoes of Plato in the Senate, Aristotle in the law courts, Epicurus in back alley gardens. The marble is newer, the scrolls shinier, but the bones, still Greek. Historians still debate whether Rome preserved Greek culture or hollowed it out. You're not sure. Some days, it feels like love. Other days, like identity theft. You once studied ethics under the stars. Now you watch a Roman general quote Zeno before ordering a massacre. It's a weird legacy. Yet, you sit in a Roman library, and there it is, your old scroll, your notes, your questions, your doodle of a goat in a philosopher's robe, copied, translated, shelved between Cicero and Seneca. You reach out and touch the spine. It's like shaking hands with your younger self. Rome builds roads, temples, laws, but Greece builds meaning, and the Romans know it. That's why they carry your gods into their homes, why they name their children after your heroes, why they keep your drama festivals alive, just with more wine and louder acting. You pass a Roman classroom. A boy recites the allegory of the cave, badly. His tutor nods anyway. You smile, because even misremembered, the cave still casts its shadows. One night, you sit by the Tiber, someone sculpting a bust of Athena in a backyard. A child sings a Homeric hymn in Latin, and you realize something strange. You're still here, not in body, not even in language, but in the foundation. Rome is flashy, but you're the blueprint under the marble. And when this empire eventually crumbles, because spoiler, it will, those scrolls, those ideas, those seeds, they'll wait for Byzantium, for the Renaissance, for you again. Somehow, you take a long breath. The stars above the forum look the same as the ones over Athens. You whisper to them. They don't answer, but they remember. The last pagan standing. You start to notice things. Shrines boarded up. Altars dusty. Priests of Apollo with too much free time. And very few worshippers. Statues with chipped noses still smile. But fewer people look up. There's a new sound in the air. Not the rhythmic chants to Dionysus or the hymn to Athena, but something hushed, urgent, whispered, underground. You don't realize it at first, but the gods are leaving. You walk through a market where the fishmonger once offered sacrifices to Poseidon. Now he mutters a cross-shaped blessing before filleting a trout. You pass a temple of Artemis, its columns crumbling, its offerings gone. Children throw stones at a statue of Pan. They laugh. You don't. And then one day it becomes official. Theodosius III, the Roman emperor, who says, no more pagan temples, no more sacrifices, no more gods of old. Just like that, centuries of divine chaos are made illegal. You blink, you squint, you whisper. Well, that escalated quickly. You meet a young woman hiding statues in a cave near Delphi. Small ones, Hermes, Demeter, even Hecate with her triple faces. She says, they might destroy the temple, but they can't take this. You help her wrap the marble in cloth. You don't know if it's preservation or denial. Maybe both. You're suddenly cautious. Where once you could yell, Zeus, strike me down, in a tavern, and just get a laugh. Now you get side-eye, and maybe a visit from a bishop. People who used to debate the ethics of love now debate heresy. The agora's still full, but the voices have changed. They quote new scriptures, new saints, new gods, or rather one. You walk into an old temple one last time. Dust in the air. A bird nesting in the crook of Apollo's arm. No incense. No chanting. You whisper a prayer anyway. You don't expect an answer. You just want the echo. They say Athens becomes a Christian city, that the academy will close, that the philosophers will scatter like dandelion seeds in a theological wind. You hear rumors of scrolls burned, teachings condemned. Historians still debate how much was truly lost and how much was simply hidden, waiting for new eyes. You clutch your old notebook like a sacred relic. You once copied Plato under oil lamps. Now you copy him in secret, just in case. You find others like you, people who still whisper eudaimonia like a mantra, who still light a lamp for Hestia at night, not for magic, but for memory. You gather in kitchens and cellars, speaking in metaphors, smiling when someone references Socrates without naming him. You're not rebels, you're not zealots, you're just people who remember, and it's not all bad. Some of the new faith's ideas resonate. Compassion, forgiveness, community. You see old gods in new robes sometimes. You hear echoes of stoicism in sermons. You feel Epicurus in the message about letting go of fear. You almost smile when someone quotes Jesus, and it sounds exactly like Zeno. But still, when you pass a ruined temple, you pause. When someone mispronounces Heraclitus, you flinch. When you dream, it's still of marble, figs, and the gods laughing over wine. They try to erase your world, but they can't unwrite joy. They can't unbuild the Parthenon. They can't untangle logic from the law. You once believed in gods who lived on a mountain. Now, you live in their afterglow. A young boy asks you one day, did Zeus really throw lightning? You think and say, sometimes. He laughs and runs off. And maybe that's all that matters. That the stories still flicker, like lamps in a sea cave. Not dead, just waiting. One evening, you return to that cave near Delphi. You light a candle. The hidden statues stare back at you with chipped, timeless eyes. You don't ask them for anything. You just sit, quiet, still, and for a moment, maybe imagined, you feel a breeze, warm, olive-scented, familiar. You don't speak, you just smile, because even if the gods have left, you never really did. Byzantine echoes. You wake up to the sound of bells, not birds. Candles flicker behind colored glass. Walls are tiled in gold and deep blue. And Greek, your beloved lyrical Greek, is still spoken. But something's changed. You're in Constantinople now. New capital, new empire, same soul, barely holding on. The Roman Empire, at least the western half, has crumbled into legend. But here in the east, Rome still breathes. Its lungs just happen to wear Greek robes and recite prayers to Christ instead of Zeus. You wander the streets of Byzantium, and it's like someone poured ancient philosophy into a cathedral-shaped mold. The air smells of incense and wet stone. Icons gaze from the walls like watchful, silent saints. Monks argue over syllables in the Nicene Creed with the same intensity you once heard in Plato's dialogues. You think the drama's the same, only the stakes have changed. In the Hagia Sophia, you hear a choir. It lifts you, but as you stare up at the dome, you realize it's not the gods who dwell here anymore. It's theology, and yet, logic still lives. You find scholars tucked away in corners, whispering Aristotle like it's contraband. You meet a scribe copying Euclid with trembling fingers, checking over his shoulder for suspicious bishops. You sit in on a debate between two old men, arguing whether the soul has substance or essence. You smile, feels like home. You visit a university where students chant Homer in unison, pausing every stanza for commentary. Someone scrawled a rude drawing of Achilles on the back page of a gospel. You nod in approval. The Greeks are still here, under layers of crosses and caution. But it's getting harder. You see schools shut down, scrolls gathering dust. More theology, less philosophy. The stars that once guided astronomers now belong to mystics. Still, every once in a while, a spark flares, a reference in a sermon, a quote buried in a saint's letter, a monk copying Plato by candlelight in the margins of a psalm. You meet Michael Psellos, a Byzantine scholar who dares to love Plato. He teaches philosophy, disguised as commentary on scripture. You ask, why hide it? He answers, because fire burns brightest under threat. You want to hug him. You settle for wine. Outside, Constantinople is bursting. Markets, prayers, sea breezes, bakers shouting prices over priests chanting prayers. It's chaotic harmony. The empire bends, but never breaks. They call it the Second Rome. But you know better. It's the last gasp of Athens in disguise. Historians still debate whether the Byzantines preserved Greek heritage or twisted it. You know it's both. They saved the scrolls. They added footnotes. They whispered old truths beneath new rituals. That's not corruption. That's adaptation. You walk through the library at the monastery of Staudios. A monk hands you a page from a burned scroll. The words are faint, but familiar. Know thyself. You sit with it. You don't pray. You remember. Years pass. Empires shift. And still you linger in the cadence of language, in the structure of arguments, in how people think, even if they forget who taught them to think. You climb the city walls at sunset. Below you, Constantinople glows. It's not Athens. It never will be. But in the distance, a ship sails west, carrying scrolls, letters, copies of copies. The Renaissance waits across the sea. Your story isn't over. You lean against the stone, tired but not extinguished. The city behind you prays in Greek, sings in Greek, builds in Greek, and maybe, just maybe, dreams in Greek. You whisper a single name to the wind, Socrates, and somewhere, far from here, in a future that doesn't need temples or togas, a young student will hear that name and begin to question the world. You are the inheritance, your eyes open to fluorescent light, not the warm glow of oil lamps, not the flicker of candlelit temples. No, this is modern. You're surrounded by screens, wires, coffee cups, and chaos that's somehow less noble than a siege and more exhausting than a philosophical debate. Welcome to the 21st century, and weirdly, you're still here. You walk past glass towers that look suspiciously like Doric columns in the skies. You hear names: Plato, Aristotle, Alexander, casually dropped in podcasts, politics, and motivational YouTube thumbnails. You see a teenager quoting Epictetus on TikTok, followed by a video of a cat in a toga. Somehow, this is legacy. You scroll through an algorithm. It recommends how to live like a Stoic, why democracy is failing. Greek philosophers roast each other, animated. You click, you laugh, you cry a little, because these aren't just echoes, they're reverberations. Your footsteps through time, still thudding against the marble floor of the human mind. In classrooms, Socrates is still annoying students. In courtrooms, Aristotle still shapes arguments. In bedrooms, Epicurus still convinces people to just breathe and eat fruit. You read someone's blog post about the allegory of the cave. It has 12,000 likes. Someone in the comments says, "This changed how I see reality." You nod, quietly proud. There's democracy, messy, loud, flawed. There's theater, now with cameras and CGI gods. There's war, of course, always war. But also, there's thought, critical thought, playful thought. The kind of thought that dares to ask, why? And doesn't shut up until it finds something beautiful or uncomfortable or true. You visit a museum behind glass, a piece of pottery you once held, a coin with Athena's face, a cracked bust of Socrates, still smirking like he knows something. A child stares at the statue. She whispers, "He looks wise." You think he was. And he was also very annoying. But you say, yes, You overhear someone quote Heraclitus, "No man ever steps in the same river twice," and then argue about it for 20 minutes. You grin, still got it. You see graffiti on a city wall. Know thyself, in spray paint, right next to a drawing of a cat eating souvlaki. Art lives. Philosophy lives. You live. Historians still debate the value of ancient Greece. Some call it the foundation of the West. Others say it's been romanticized, sanitized, misunderstood. You let them debate because you were there. You remember the dirt under your feet, the arguments in the agora, the hemlock in the cup. You know the truth was never in perfection. It was in the struggle to think, to question, to hope. And now here you are, still hoping, still trying to make sense of the world with words. Not with swords, not with conquests, but with wonder. You don't need to light a lamp or bow at an altar. You just have to remember that you're the product of every question ever asked. That the DNA of thought is curled up in you. That behind your Google search for how to live a good life is the whisper of a man in a dirty tunic saying, "The unexamined life is not worth living." You are the inheritance, not marble, not myth, not empire. You, breathing, wondering, choosing. And if that isn't divinely Greek, nothing is. You close your eyes. The chaos of modern life hums around you. You breathe in and out, quiet, thoughtful, alive, and far, far from done. Word count, 3,186. 300-word series summary. You've marched through Persian invasions, bled in Spartan boot camps, whispered prayers at Delphi, and questioned everything with Socrates until your brain ached. You drank hemlock with the thinkers, built caves of illusion with Plato, and tried to eat lunch ethically under Aristotle's constant analysis. You celebrated Dionysia, survived the Peloponnesian War, and rode east with a boy who would become a god until he died and left his empire like shattered marble. You copied scrolls in Alexandria, found joy with Epicurus, and failed heroically at being stoic when your figs were underripe. You danced in cities of ideas, cheered plays about olives and betrayal, and watched Rome take everything, but also immortalize it. You hid gods in caves as Christianity swept the land, and in Byzantium, you watched Greek thought slip into marble mosaics and incense smoke. And when the old temples crumbled, you whispered their names to the wind. Then you woke up, here, in algorithms, in memes, in late-night essays and classroom debates, and teenagers writing essays about democracy and identity, and whether Plato would have had a podcast. You didn't vanish. You became the underpinning, not of a culture, of a conversation. The story of Greece is not just the past. It's you in every quiet moment you ask, what is good? What is real? What now? And if you've ever stared at the ceiling late at night, wondering if your life means something, congratulations, you're still part of the story. End of script. Good night.